Welcome everybody, and welcome to my series of videos about EU reform and enlargement, and this one devoted now about Southeastern Europe, the Balkan enlargement. You might have seen some of my videos before. Maybe this is the first one. Maybe this is the first one here for Montenegro, a NATO country. I'm very happy about this, and also a very advanced country on the way to the European Union, and hope being that it will be really very fast in the European Union. It's a very special week with a lot of key moments. Especially, it's the week of the memorial of 25 years of Srebrenica, of this terrible genocide and of the Bosnian war disaster, which happened under our watch. The Western world already active with NATO in this terrible war in Bosnia, just close here. And we should never forget how terrible that was and how really dramatic it has been for all of us involved, either directly or just watching from Austria or somewhere without really intervening. And when we intervened, we were really too weak and we were basically ineffective. And it took a long time until August 95 to really effectively make peace. And you see how much involved we are already in the Balkans, and how terrible it can be. Under our watch, really terrible things can slip into disaster, and this should be a kind of strong reminder towards the responsibility the Western policymakers, the EU, the NATO really has, and what means this in the year 2020 in this corona crisis. Obviously, we have to speed up EU and NATO enlargement. Yeah? I think it's so obvious that we have to live and understand there's this challenge. Yeah? And the answer is our institutions work. Yeah? All this kind of negative talk about the crisis, of course it's a crisis, but it's an external crisis. It's not a EU institutional or NATO institutional crisis. We have to answer that by including all Eastern Europeans who want and all Southeastern Europeans who want into our working structures. So this day, the 10th, 11th of July, 25 years after Srebrenica, must be the moment where a clear invitation to Bosnia, to Kosovo, but also to Serbia is made for NATO membership. And, it is a stable and a strong message, and it's a kind of a framework everybody can live very well. It's the security, it's peace, and this is very important. I really lack any understanding for people who don't want to join NATO, neither from Austria, nor from Bosnia, nor from Serbia. And this is really beyond any understanding. It's for me a mystery how anybody can have this kind of views. But okay, there are people protesting now about many things in Serbia, in Montenegro, and I understand there is unhappiness on some issues, and unhappiness is part of democracy. We have to be, that's normal, yeah. But violence is absolutely wrong, yeah. And none of the states here is a dictatorship, like some say it. Yeah, this is absolutely not true. And if they are imperfect democracies, no, that's totally true, and that's why they have to join the European Union and NATO to be better democracies and better working systems. Yeah, it's an illusion that there is perfection outside of the European Union, and even inside it's a long process. Yeah, but delaying and postponing is certainly the wrong way. And it's the wrong form of answer. And we should not let the French again push us into any kind of very nice looking EU reforms while we don't do our homework of enlarging and including the Eastern Europeans. Yeah? I mean, they have done that already in 2003-04 when the big enlargement came. Then they said, okay, we have now to do the convention and the constitution. And where did it fail? In the Netherlands and in France, the big promoters about the European unification deepening. Yeah? I mean, we have to be realistic. What is our main task? Our main task is security, stability, prosperity in Central and Eastern Europe. It's not, making a perfect, even more perfect France or even more perfect Netherlands. Yeah? I mean, these are already very fantastic countries. Yeah? These are really great places to live, secure and beautiful, despite, everybody, no place is a paradise. Understandable. Everybody wants lower taxes or wants better social security or more welfare, more prosperity, but this is not so easy to achieve. Yeah? We can make another video how this should be done by France, but certainly, and nobody in France lives better, because if Montenegro is in the EU or not in the EU, yeah? Just the Montenegrinians live much worse, yeah? And the Bosnians live much worse, and the Ukrainians live much worse, yeah? And they have then to illegally immigrate to the European Union, work there under very difficult conditions in this kind of gray sector of visa-free 3 months employment, and then they are victims of bad working conditions. And this is really not what we should do. Yeah? We cannot build a perfect Europe for the Western Europeans by ignoring this 67 million Eastern Europeans who really want to join. I cannot see how that should improve anything in Brussels or Paris, or it's not so expensive ultimately compared to all these Corona funds and the whole budget of France. Yeah, it doesn't really make such a big difference for the French taxpayers if Ukraine or Kosovo is a member of the European Union. And even if they have a vote then on the EU Council, they will not gang up against France and make everything different and outvote Paris. It's not how the world runs. Yeah? It's totally ridiculous, and it's basically very negative of the French to blackmail and the responsible Central Europeans, the Germans, Austrians, and some others who really want enlargement. The Austrians, sadly, recently a bit less, but who the ones in the European responsibility who really care for new countries and understand the necessities, but also the moral obligation behind it. Yeah? And then the French say, oh, deepening, and, we will deliver, and, greater Europe. And they want to just, divide us a bit more from the Americans. Yeah? And that's ultimately very dangerous. Yeah? A kind of Euro-nationalistic super-state, which is somehow different from the Americans, and then starts to have opposing global priorities and trajectories on issues like China, Iran, or Russia, especially Russia. I mean, we really have to have the support of the Americans in these big global discussions and confrontations. Yeah? Let's be sure about all these things which are happening now in Ukraine and in Serbia, Montenegro. One would really be very surprised if there is no support from the various Russian support agencies, let's call it like this, who are really very actively now to derail the success of the last 20 years of European peace in the Balkans, and now the precarious stability which was achieved in the last years in Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova. And they have succeeded in some countries. They have their political forces, and they are trying very, very hard to derail this European agenda. And if we somehow are so divided and somehow act like we have done before 95, and the Bosnian story is very telling. During the years where Germany, France, America had very different priorities in Bosnia, it was a disastrous civil war. It was a tragedy. Only with Chirac's elections in 95 there was some unity, and it was still very painful what happened during the learning phase. And then we had this opportunity and the understanding and the unity to intervene together, and then peace was established. Was it fair or not? That's a very complicated other question, but nevertheless it was really necessary to have a peace and to have an agreement to settle the conflict, and this was achieved. And so let's not go down the Dayton line, but let's celebrate that there is now 25 years of peace in Bosnia, and celebrate it with allowing the Bosnians to adopt the euro. And they have pegged this currency already, the mark, to the euro. So it's a very small step ahead. I made several videos about the currency issues. I hope some of you have seen it. But the thing is really, again, who is in NATO, who is pegged to the euro, or best adopted it, and who is ready for the regulatory and political alignment which the EU requires. Ultimately, let's be in the EU very fast. There is no reason why a country like Montenegro, Macedonia, North Macedonia, and Albania should not be in this mandate in the European Union. I cannot understand why we should wait a decade or what the 3 mandates more, like Macron has said, is utterly ridiculous. What really should get better here outside of the holy grail of European unification? The idea that everybody does some dry dock preparation and gets perfect in the outside world somewhere, lost in transition, has not proven really the reality. The country is really slide in some kind of complicated, not very productive balancing act then. And the powers that be, they take the control of the assets, and we have negative effects. Because they control the political system, and then they see there's no real pressure of EU unification, and then they start misbehaving, and abusing the power they have, because there is no European level above them to control them. And this goes from competition, this goes from currency, this goes from the rule of law, to the regulatory alignment which is necessary, and the political pressure of the accession process which is really happening, and also the control which is secured by the European institutions, to which you have to respond and report once you are a member. So membership is really very clear for the NATO allies, Macedonia, Albania, and Montenegro. And in the second stage also, and this is now about the Paris summit we have now, very clearly for Kosovo, for Serbia, for Bosnia, all 3 in NATO, Serbia to back to the euro, the currency to be stable, and all 3 countries in WTO, because the 3 are not. And so these 3 countries together at the end of this decade in the European Union as a result of the prior memberships of NATO, WTO, and of backing the Serbian DINA, which actually has a terrible history of the last ever. So why not? Basically, all this currency will anyhow disappear. It's a question just when, and they were never very good for the savers, for the consumers, for anybody, for the investors. It was always a disaster, these currencies, and they have much better for everybody if they somehow disappear in their own monetary policy, and later then also physically in the euro. And that's the plan anyhow with European unification. So let me also make the case that Ukraine, please, to recognize Kosovo, that would be very good, and to show that Ukraine is a real Western ally. There were now big setbacks on Ukraine with the central bank, and that was very worrying. It was really, like I say, 3 years already since 2017 I make this campaign, Ukraine back to the euro, that means a stable currency brought to the euro, in order to avoid all these manipulations, and then really to have small countries, even Ukraine is a relatively small country economically, to have their own currency policy under this kind of fragile political circumstances is simply unworkable. So that has to stop, and please back to the euro, and make a currency board to the euro, and really revitalize the pro-European and pro-NATO reform agenda. Not just in lip service, but in real, tangible reforms. And that's very important. And it starts with the currency, as it has started in the Western German Republic, in the BRD, with the currency in 1948. It then comes the NATO enlargement, and then the EU. That's the cadence, that's the step-by-step currency, NATO, and then EU enlargement. And we can be united very fast. And we know once we are united, we can go to the next level of unification. That's just a question of compromise and of finding the way forward. We are then 37 countries. If the British join again, which they should, or 36, or maybe 37, the final number is still open. Maybe Armenia will also join one day. But I advocate these 9 new countries, 6 in the Balkans, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, and then we are ready, basically, and we can go to United States of Europe if we want, or we can do some compromises. We can find various steps. The American unification now 244 years, that's it this year. So there is time, once we are united, to find the balance and to find the way where everybody can go along. There is different traditions in Europe. We will find the right ways forward. There is no limit on that one. We can be a very strong state if we want to. We can be a looser federation, a union. There's many ways to do that, and that can be done. But we shouldn't exclude the Ukrainians. If they want to join, we shouldn't exclude anybody from the Balkans. And, we should really be first focused on enlargement. Yeah? And parallel, always responding to the crisis, and where there is a consensus, to deepen. Yeah, I'm totally in favor of it. Yeah, there was nothing bad with the constitutional process per se. Yeah? Why not? Yeah, but what is really bad then to make great proclamations and then to say we are super democrats, make a referendum, and then everything fails. Yeah, and that is a setback. That's a real setback for everybody. It's better to smoothly, gradually take everybody along if it's difficult, and then to make sure that this is really inclusive. Yeah? Because first of all, we have to be really sure that we are representative of most of the continent. Yeah? And rejecting countries makes us very, very big credibility gap. Yeah? And we are also not relevant globally. When then the Ukrainians appear somewhere on a global stage and said we wanted to join, but they didn't let us, or the Serbians run around and say, anyhow, we love China more and Russia. This is simply not working. And we say the global role of the euro and, the future of Europe, we will be so strong. When in the reality we are, okay. Obviously we are great and fantastic continent, and we have great potential and a great reality. But, not including countries really eats up our credibility globally. What kind of union is this when the Europeans want to join and they are delayed for decades? Yeah? This is, you want to go to Africa and say, yes, we have these poor countries in Europe, we don't take them, but we are really very interested in your prosperity in Africa. Yeah? We are ready to help you, but with the Eastern Europeans. Yeah? And, it's not true that the Asians and the Africans and the Americans don't know Eastern Europe, or they don't know Europe. Obviously, they know us very well. Yeah? They know, they are also educated elite, and they watch exactly what we're doing. And when we are somehow on this vital and fragile periphery, not really conclusive and logical, how to go then to Addis Ababa and Washington and say, we have everything under control, please do it the European way, we know everything, from GMO to agriculture, we know the way, we, the Europeans, and then we have this major credibility gap. I think it's not possible. It's not credible. And so for us as European elite, whatever political direction, to reject the 6 Balkan countries and the 3 ERPA countries who want to join is really leading to a major issue. And so that's really wrong. And so please, we have to revitalize all the necessary processes, the Berlin process, also to get Ukraine and Georgia, Moldova into this Berlin process, to ensure that in the corona crisis there is massive help also for these pro-European countries and all 9 countries to do the necessary currency steps if they're not already taken. Most of the countries have already back to the euro, and some of them, 3 of them, already joined NATO. So these are major steps, and then to award our allies. Yeah? Once they have achieved this, we cannot say, but in the rule of law or in this we found some... Of course, there are problems everywhere. Yeah? There are problems from Hungary to Austria to Portugal to anywhere. Yeah? There are so many problems, but, not to reject them because of them, but to help them. Yeah? That should be the real central point. Yeah? Also, when it comes to the question of the corona travel restrictions, we have to help the countries. Yeah? We should not exclude them and say, hey, you have a high number, you are now out, yeah, and you can cook in your own crisis, and we look later how many you are, and we help you mobilely. No, we have to help. We have to be responsible. We have to really support them and be open and be inclusive. And this is what this crisis tells us. We have to be much more European in the next next decade. We have to be much stronger united. And this is the real answer to all these burning issues, economically, physically, public health, security, strategic with Russia. This continent must be much more united. Yeah? And what we learn out of Srebrenica and what we learn out of the Balkan crisis of the 90s and of the Ukraine and Eastern European crisis of the last 10 years is, yeah, if we are like divided, you know, we are easy picking and choosing for the enemies of Europe and, you know, for our enemies. Then everybody individual can make a deal, yeah, with the Russians or partly with the Chinese and think he gets better off. But ultimately all of us in Europe are much worse off if we are so disunited. And so ultimately, please, this is my call on this 11th of July and this weekend, where it's an important weekend for the Balkans, and also many decisions are heading on in Europe, which are concerning the future of Europe and the next steps and the success of the whole mandate now from 19 to 24. Really, the enlargement, especially of Montenegro, great cards here from Montenegro, you see the stone wall from Albania, from North Macedonia, these three countries really in this mandate in the European Union as full members. And let's not do it like we did it with the Croatians and Bulgarians and with the Romanians, this kind of second-class membership which we have started outside of Schengen, outside of Eurozone, outside of the OECD, but get them into all these processes, make sure they are in OECD as well, they are in the Schengen zone, they are and the Euro, obviously, yeah. Maybe we can make it not a full member of the Euro, but like Montenegro is, and to have unilateral Euro membership. Okay, some compromises will be understandable, some kind of supervised membership. I have argued already about that, what for a transition period. Maybe there's a reason for that, yeah, maybe yes, obviously, maybe sure. But not to delay it further until the 35 or so, like Emmanuel Macron was saying. This is really morally, historically, politically, strategically wrong. So please, more unity and more unity in this mandate. Thanks a lot. Best regards.